From ancient Rome to modern day, there have been many special forces that have existed before the Navy SEALs. These are the 15 deadliest special forces in history. Number 15. Roman Speculatores. The Speculatores were the spies and assassins of the legions of ancient Rome. They were used to infiltrate enemy territory, gather intelligence, and assassinate high-value targets. They were also used as shock troops, often being sent in ahead of the main force to scout out the enemy, and then either assassinating them or routing them before the big army showed up. Many historians believe that the idea of the Roman Speculatores was based off of the Greek perioko, whose primary purpose was to gather intel behind enemy lines. The Speculatores were typically recruited from the ranks of the legionaries themselves, often being volunteers who had distinguished themselves in combat. They were highly trained in all aspects of warfare, including weapons training, hand-to-hand combat, and strategy. They were also skilled in disguise, which allowed them to infiltrate enemy camps undetected. In addition to their military training, the Speculatores were also required to be physically fit and of a certain height and weight standard. They had to be tall enough to ride a horse and strong enough to carry heavy armor and weapons. The use of special forces in warfare is a relatively recent development in military history. However, the Romans were among the first to recognize the importance of having a dedicated group of troops who were experts in reconnaissance and infiltration. They developed a number of different types of special forces units, each with its own unique role and purpose. Number 14. Mongol Keshig. The Keshig were Genghis Khan's imperial guard and the most elite of his armies. They protected him and his family and were the shock troops of his armies, always being the first into battle and usually against the enemy's best. To become a Keshig, one had to be of noble birth, have proven their bravery and skill in battle, and be loyal to the Khan. The requirements to join the Keshig were very strict. Only the most skilled and experienced warriors were selected to serve in this elite unit. Training was rigorous and designed to push the Keshig to their physical and mental limits. They were taught how to fight on horseback while wielding a bow and arrow or a sword. They were also trained in siege warfare and other military tactics. Members of the Keshig were expected to be loyal to the death and were forbidden from taking prisoners. They were given the best equipment and horses and were allowed to plunder the riches of their enemies. This ensured that they were well equipped and motivated to fight. The Keshig played an important role in many of the Mongol Empire's greatest victories. They were instrumental in defeating the Western Shaya, Jin, and Sung dynasties and were present at the battles of the Khalkha River and the siege of Baghdad. Number 13. Persian Immortals. These guys were the shock troops of the Achaemenid Empire. They earned the name Immortals because, no matter how many fell in battle, they were replaced so fast it felt like their numbers were endless. Picture this: a standing army of 10,000 elite soldiers, always ready to fight at a moment's notice. Unlike the usual nobility, King Cyrus the Great picked them from his fellow Persians and Medes. The Immortals were super disciplined, following orders without a second thought and ready to lay down their lives for the empire. That made them pretty unstoppable, even when outnumbered. Armed with swords, spears, and bows, they wore protective gear that made them tough against arrows. Organized into 10 companies named after Persian gods, each was led by a satrap responsible for training and discipline. Whenever trouble brewed, these fierce warriors rallied together under their king's command, ready to defend their empire. Number 12. Ninja Shinobi of Japan. The ninja, also known as the shinobi, were covert operatives in feudal Japan who played a critical role in the country's history. They were employed by the ruling class to gather intelligence on their enemies, sabotage their operations, and carry out assassination missions. Their skills were highly prized during the Sengoku period, a time of constant warfare and intrigue. Ninjas were typically young, agile men who had undergone rigorous training in the martial arts. They were experts in stealth, espionage, and sabotage, and were often employed to infiltrate enemy camps and steal sensitive information. They were also skilled in hand-to-hand combat and were often used as assassins. In addition to their military skills, ninjas were also required to be intelligent and cunning. They had to be able to think several moves ahead in order to stay one step ahead of their enemies. They were also proficient in disguise and deception, which allowed them to infiltrate enemy camps undetected. The ninja were a secretive lot and not much is known about them today, except through the stories and legends that have been passed down through the ages. However, what we do know is that they were highly effective in their missions, and that their skills were highly valued by the ruling class. Number 11. Hashashins. The Hashashin were a secretive medieval sect of assassins who operated in the Middle East during the 11th and 12th centuries. They were members of a branch of Islam known as Ismailism, and their methods of killing were so effective that they became synonymous with the word assassin. The Hashashin were trained to be patient and methodical in their approach to killing their targets. They would spend months or even years observing their target, learning their habits and routines before making a move. This allowed them to strike when their target was most vulnerable and ensured that the assassination would go smoothly. The Hashashin were also trained in a variety of fighting styles, including unarmed combat, sword fighting, and archery. This gave them the ability to take out their targets from a variety of different angles and made it difficult for their targets to defend themselves. In addition to their combat skills, the Hashashin were also experts in poisons and drugs. They would often drug their targets or poison their food or drink, which made it easy to take them out without anyone being the wiser. The effectiveness of the Hashashin's methods is evidenced by the fact that they were able to eliminate some of the most powerful people in the Middle East, including several caliphs and sultans. Number 10. Viking Berserkers. The Berserker was a member of a Scandinavian elite military force during the Viking Age. They were fierce and terrifying warriors who were said to be able to fight like wolves, unleashing a primal rage that knew no bounds. Berserkers were often employed as shock troops, leading the charge into battle and striking fear into the hearts of their enemies. But they were also used for psychological warfare. By intimidating and demoralizing their opponents, the Berserkers helped to ensure that the Vikings came out on top in battle. The Berserkers were highly trained in the use of weapons such as the axe and sword, and they were also experts in hand-to-hand combat. They were said to be able to fight with superhuman strength and endurance, and they were virtually fearless in the face of danger. The combination of their military prowess and their intimidating presence made the Berserkers a formidable force on the battlefield. Number 9. Sacred Band of Thebes. The Sacred Band of Thebes was an elite group of 150 pairs of warrior lovers, who fought for the Theban army in ancient Greece. They were renowned for their bravery, skill in battle, and unwavering commitment to each other and to the defense of their city. The band was formed by the Theban general Epaminondas in the early 4th century BC. He chose 150 pairs of male lovers to form the core of his military force, believing that their deep emotional bonds would make them formidable fighters. Each pair was trained to fight as one, with one member specializing in offense and the other in defense. The Sacred Band was instrumental in several important Theban victories, including the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, where they defeated the Spartan army, ending Spartan dominance in Greece. Despite their success, the Sacred Band was eventually disbanded after Epaminondas' death in 362 BC. The loss of their leader and the weakening of Thebes led to the band's eventual dissolution. Number 8. Samurai Hatamoto. The samurai were a class of professional warriors in feudal Japan who played a critical role in the country's history. And among them, the Hatamoto held a special place as the personal guard of the shogun, the supreme military commander and de facto ruler of Japan. The Hatamoto were handpicked by the shogun and were considered to be the elite of the samurai class. They were highly trained in the martial arts and were expected to be loyal and obedient to their master. The Hatamoto were responsible for protecting the shogun and his family, as well as carrying out special missions assigned by the shogun. They were also expected to be proficient in a variety of weaponry, including swords, bows, and guns. The Hatamoto lived in a special compound near the shogun's palace and were required to follow a strict code of conduct. They were expected to be honorable, courteous, and disciplined at all times, as they were seen as the embodiment of the samurai ideal. The Hatamoto played an important role in maintaining the stability and order of feudal Japan, and their loyalty and courage were instrumental in the shogun's ability to rule. Number 7. Ottoman Janissaries. The Janissaries were an elite corps of soldiers in the Ottoman army who played a critical role in the empire's military successes during the 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries. They were originally formed by Sultan Murad I in 1365 as a slave army, but eventually evolved into a standing army with non-slave members. The Janissaries were highly trained and disciplined soldiers who were adept at both offensive and defensive warfare. They were known for their skill in using firearms, as well as their proficiency with swords and other weapons. In addition to their military skills, the Janissaries were also required to be literate and numerate. They were trained in a variety of subjects, including mathematics, astronomy, and engineering, which made them some of the most well-rounded soldiers of their time. The Janissaries were fiercely loyal to the Sultan and were tasked with protecting him and his family. They also played a critical role in suppressing rebellions and maintaining order within the empire. Despite their many accomplishments, the Janissaries were eventually disbanded by Sultan Mahmud II in 1826. Their resistance to reform and modernization ultimately led to their downfall. Number 6. Zulu Impi. The Zulu Impi was a highly disciplined strike regiment of warriors from the Zulu Kingdom in South Africa during the early 19th century. They were known for their distinctive war dance, the bull that dances, and their ability to fight as a cohesive unit. Each regiment consisted of between 500 and 1,500 men who were all related to each other. They were led by a chief, and each regiment had its own distinctive name and flag. The Zulu Impi were highly skilled in the art of war, and their tactics were both innovative and effective. They typically fought in two lines, with the first line consisting of heavily armed warriors, who were tasked with breaking through the enemy's defenses, and the second line consisting of lighter armed warriors who provided support. The Zulus were also known for their use of psychology in warfare. They would often intimidate their opponents by making strange noises and dancing before battle. This was meant to confuse and frighten the enemy, making them more susceptible to the Zulus' military tactics. The Zulu Impi were at their most powerful under the leadership of King Shaka Zulu, who reigned from 1828 to 1839. During his reign, the Zulu kingdom grew to become one of the most powerful states in southern Africa. Number 5. Hwarang Korea. The Hwarang were an elite group of warrior youth who played a significant role in the history of the Korean Three Kingdoms period. They were highly trained in the martial arts and were known for their bravery and skill in battle. The Hwarang were recruited from the nobility and were typically between the ages of 16 and 30. They were trained in a variety of disciplines, including swordsmanship, archery, horsemanship, and hand-to-hand combat. In addition to their martial arts training, the Hwarang were also educated in Confucian, philosophy, and ethics, which was meant to cultivate their character and make them better warriors. The Hwarang were involved in many important battles during the Three Kingdoms period, and their contributions were instrumental in the unification of Korea. They played a key role in the establishment of the Shilla Kingdom as a major power in East Asia. The Hwarang remain an important part of Korean history, and their legacy is still celebrated today. Number 4. Mamluks of Egypt. The Mamluks were a group of elite soldier rulers who dominated Egypt from the 13th to 16th centuries. They were initially brought to Egypt as slave soldiers by the Ayyubid dynasty, but eventually gained power and established their own dynasty. The Mamluks were highly trained in the martial arts and were known for their skill in combat. They were typically recruited from among the Circassians, Turks and Kurds. The Mamluk army was well organized and disciplined, and they were adept at both offensive and defensive warfare. In addition to their military skills, the Mamluks were also well educated and were proficient in various crafts, such as metalworking and carpentry. This made them one of the most versatile and capable fighting forces of their time. The Mamluk dynasty was responsible for building many impressive structures in Egypt, including mosques, madrasas, and palaces. Despite their accomplishments, the Mamluk dynasty eventually declined due to internal strife and external pressures. They were eventually overthrown by the Ottoman Empire in 1517. Number 3. Swiss pikemen. Swiss pikemen were mercenary soldiers who dominated European battlefields during the 15th and 16th centuries. They were known for their skill and bravery in battle and were highly sought after by European monarchs and rulers. The Swiss pikemen were organized into tight-knit groups called companies, which were led by experienced officers. They were well trained in the use of their primary weapon, the pike, as well as other weapons such as swords and daggers. The pike was a long wooden pole with a sharp metal point at one end, which made it an effective weapon for both offense and defense. The Swiss pikemen were also known for their discipline and their ability to maintain their formation in the face of enemy attacks. They were often deployed in large numbers, forming a dense wall of pikes that was nearly impenetrable. Their effectiveness in battle led to them being hired by many European rulers, including the French, Spanish, and Roman emperors. They played a critical role in many important battles, including the Battle of Sabes and the Battle of Pavia. Despite their success, the Swiss pikemen eventually declined as a force to be reckoned with during the 17th century due to changes in warfare tactics and the emergence of new military technologies. Number 2. Comanche warriors. The Comanche warriors were a fierce Native American tribe that dominated the Great Plains from the 17th to 19th centuries. They were known for their skills in horseback riding and hunting, and were highly adept at stealth and guerrilla warfare tactics. The Comanche were highly skilled in the use of bows and arrows, and were also proficient in the use of guns. They typically hunted buffalo and other large game, but were also known to raid settlements for food and supplies. In addition to their hunting skills, the Comanche were also highly skilled in tracking, and were able to follow tracks over long distances and difficult terrain. They were also experts in camouflage and could easily hide from their enemies. The Comanche were known for their bravery and their ability to fight back against the encroaching settlers and the U.S. Army. They resisted efforts to confine them to reservations and continued to raid settlements and stage attacks against their enemies until the late 19th century. The Comanche were eventually forced onto reservations, but their legacy as fierce and independent warriors continues to live on. Number 1. Apache Scouts. The Apache Scouts were elite warriors from the Apache tribe in the southwestern United States during the 19th century. They were known for their skills in tracking, scouting, and guerrilla warfare. The Apaches were highly skilled trackers and were able to follow tracks over long distances and difficult terrain. They were also experts in camouflage and could easily hide from their enemies. The Apaches were also highly skilled in guerrilla warfare tactics, which they used to great effect against the U.S. Army and other forces. They were able to ambush their enemies and then retreat into the rugged terrain of their homelands, where it was difficult for their pursuers to follow. The Apaches were led by a number of notable chiefs, including Cochise and Geronimo, who became famous for their resistance against the U.S. Army. Despite their fierce resistance, the Apaches were eventually forced onto reservations. The legacy of these warriors still echoes in today's special forces. Which ancient unit impressed you the most? Tell us below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more forgotten history.